We continue with our agenda here at Redeye Medtech and Diagnostics Day with our next presenting company, Episealer, with CEO Pål Ryfors. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Pål Ryfors. I'm the CEO of Episealer Medical. I'm here to provide a little bit more of an update rather than a general company presentation today, but let's get into it. During the pandemic, Episealer has really developed on the clinical pipeline that we set out to develop upon a few years ago. The results that have come in are just as strong as predicted, and the launch of the Episealer implant has been very successful in our opinion. COVID-19 has obviously created challenges in our commercialization. However, we've been focusing even more on regulatory work and product development work, as you will see a little bit today. We are now expanding the indications for our technology. This is highly exciting, and we now have 2 510(k) products in pipeline for the US market. We think we are in a position to grow outside of the US and certain other markets outside of Europe, in Asia, for example. We are also in a good position to deliver on our US strategy, which now includes 1 PMA strategy and 2 510(k) products. The original problem remains osteoarthritis. You see on the left side, perfectly healthy knee joint, and on the right side, you see an arthritic knee. In the knee, this often starts in your early 20s. For example, a small hole in the cartilage gets bigger and bigger year after year, and ultimately you're down to bone on bone, as you will see, and you have full osteoarthritis in the knee. And this goes for more or less any joint in the body. And for these patients, they often end up with a knee replacement, a total knee or a uni knee, following several years of pain and limited treatment options available to them. On the far right side, you see an Episealer patient a couple of years after surgery. This is a perfect outcome, and as you can see, there's only 1 component in this implant system. And on the US market, for example, there are no knee implants available or approved without 2 components. So this is revolutionary. I'll explain more. The Episealer implant, we launched that last year. Ankle fractures on the talus bone, very difficult to treat, big challenge for orthopedic surgeons out there. So both of our current indications, the focal lesions in the knee and in the ankle, these lesions, they come with challenges. So the original challenges related to primarily the underlying bone quality. The pain is in the bone. There's no pain in the cartilage as such. You need to consider the surrounding cartilage, how that interacts with the implant and also the opposing cartilage. That's probably the biggest question for surgeons out there. Does the metal implant, create wear and tear on the opposing side? And our technology, we've developed this for several years ourselves. It's based on our own imaging capabilities. So we analyze the cartilage lesion, but also the underlying bone quality. And based on that, we design patient-specific implants and patient-specific drill guides. And in the operating room, the surgeon use those guides to be able to position the implant perfectly. So with the exact correct depth, angulation, and so on. And there's no 99% outcome here. This has to be perfect, and it is with our tools. The implant is coated with hydroxyapatite and titanium, so it grows into bone. It sits there, and it's a 1-piece cobalt chromium construction. So this implant doesn't break down in any way. It sits there. And as you can see, images from the ankle, for example, it sits there very well. And it's important for us to prove that it sits there over time and it works in the human body. These joints are exposed to heavy load, and this is challenging. But now we have really seen several clinical publications coming out in favor of the Episealer technology, and this is highly exciting, and this is also necessary to be able to commercialize something like this in the orthopedic industry. Pre-2020, we had very limited clinical evidence, but you can see now several studies are accepted, and we're waiting the acceptance of the health economic study now, and I would like to say any day, actually. Looking ahead a little bit far right on the slide, the big goal is, of course, the US market for the big Episealer portfolio, but that requires us executing on the EPIC knee study, which is the PMA-related study we are conducting. So where are we today? So in Europe, we have a sales force in Europe. We have rehired sales representatives in the Benelux region. We've added a distributor to our reps in the UK market, preparing for a proper launch in the UK market. And on the last 12 months, we're actually having 70 surgeons across Europe and some in Asia that are using this technology. And that figure is important because when we reach first 100 and 200 surgeons, the numbers will become much more material on the top line. And our regulatory strategy, I mentioned this in the beginning, it includes a broad global strategy. So we have been really focusing on this now during the pandemic, executing on the regulatory work in several countries. And it's best illustrated maybe by this graph where we see that we've essentially doubled the number of countries that we're active in. And already this year we have sold implants in 15 countries. I think that's quite impressive. So the challenge from here is not necessarily to add many more countries. It's about market penetration in the countries we're in. Growing from a couple of key opinion leaders to expand out to a bigger group of surgeons in each country, and we're doing that. And those of you who have followed us for a while, you know that orthopedic surgery and introducing something like this takes time. And our surgeons who used the technology from the very start up to 2019, new surgeons that came in took about 10 months between first and second surgery. In lack of clinical data, you review your own patients, you try 1 or 2 or 3 maybe, and you do it cautiously. Now, during the pandemic, we actually cut that metric in half by 50%, so that's quite interesting. And now we also have much more data, so surgeons are much more keen on using this more frequently, faster, and we expect this ratio to decrease even more. And surgeons are also much more keen on talking about this technology because this is something new, it's revolutionary. This is not a well-established market of small implants. So they like to advertise this to their peers on clinical congresses and, as you can see, on social media on the far right side here. The Episealer talus implant, the ankle implant, I'll show you a real-life example. This is a patient treated late May 2021, 100% pain-free actually since August. And you can guess yourself which foot she was treated in. I will not tell you. So based on all of this, we now decided to expand the portfolio. And why are we doing that? So first of all, this is really driven by demand. There are several problems out there in the orthopedic industry that are yet to be solved. And we believe that the Episealer technology, we've now shown that it's a technology platform, can treat a lot of those. And in the US market, which is sort of a priority for us now, it's clear that surgeons need new technologies for their own marketing. They want to attract patients and they want to have a good new technology to treat the patient and drive patient flow to the clinics. And the regulatory environment within a 510(k) system is much more straightforward. And what you're actually saying to the FDA is that you're not that unique because you can show equivalence to something else. However, you're going into a market with existing reimbursement, existing revenues, existing customers, etc. So that is much more easier to penetrate than what we have been doing in Europe, which is launching something completely new, which is interesting in itself. And we believe we have a favorable competitive position because in a pros and cons discussion with a surgeon, our technology comes out very well in that discussion. And convincing a surgeon from switching from one implant system to another is much more easier than what I just said about launching something completely new. So just as a reminder, our first 510(k) product, we announced that earlier this year, is the Episealer Patellofemoral System. So the knee joint is made up out of 3 compartments, essentially 3 different joints. And osteoarthritis patients, 50% of them, they have osteoarthritis in one of the compartments. And 18% of all of them have osteoarthritis in the patellofemoral compartment. So patients who are on the path to develop osteoarthritis in that compartment can be candidates for, could potentially then be candidates for our soon-to-be launched Episealer Patellofemoral System. So again, a reminder, we launched it earlier this year, aiming at filing the 510(k) application in Q4 2021, and we are on a good way to achieve that mission. So some exciting news we announced this morning is that we're now also looking into osteoarthritis in the MTP-joint, and we're talking about the first MTP-joint. This is the greater toe. big common medical condition. About 2.5% of all individuals above 50 are estimated to suffer from this. These patients, they suffer from pain, stiffness in the toe, and the range of motion is significantly decreased when you experience this. And the treatment algorithm today consists of biological procedures and several implant solutions, and also the most dominant one, fusion. And over the last decade, significant interest in this problem from the industry, limited progress. And fusion, as I said, is still the dominant procedure. And we have done our homework. We believe we can develop and launch a very competitive product for this, this medical problem. And the US market alone is worth an estimated $400 million. So this is interesting for us. And real life example again, you can clearly see that we need what is called dorsiflexion when you speak about the greater toe. And if going from a normal toe of 90 degrees, you're going down to below 45 and down to 20, you're talking about osteoarthritis in the greater toe. And if this was only about removing pain, fusion would do. So then we wouldn't have a business case. However, range of motion in the human body is essential to live a normal life. And the best products out there, what we hear from surgeons and what our research tells us is that they all stiffen up. So that's the reality. And we believe that the patient-specific Episealer technology could be a solution for many of those patients. We have learned a lot from developing the Episealer knee technology and later the Episealer talus technology. So we have a good model to develop new products. We've done cadaver testing, we've done IP review, etc., etc. So now what we're saying today is that we are targeting an FDA 510K filing to the FDA late 22 or first half of 23. That's the ambition for now. And as you can see on this picture on the far right side here, this joint suffers from cartilage lesion just as any other joint. So this is a problem that needs to be solved. And I'm happy to tell you what we announced a couple of weeks ago. Patrick Jamnik has joined us, extensive experience from the orthopedic industry, and he is now the president of Episurf Medical Inc. So he will be in charge of all our efforts over there. And summarizing then where we are today, so focus areas going forward. So the Episealer knee technology in Europe and the rest of the world, it's about continued and increased commercialization efforts. Episealer knee, for the US market, we need to focus on patient recruitment and then follow up and PMA process somewhere late 24-25 for that product. Episealer talus in Europe and the rest of the world, studies ongoing in Europe and continued commercialization in parallel with that. And what I just mentioned on the Patellofemoral System, the 510K product, and now the Episealer MTP system, also a 510K product later, hopefully 22, early 23. So our strategy remains. Targets unchanged, $1 billion market, achieve 30% market share over time, 15% after launch of the full Episealer portfolio in the US market. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pål, for that presentation. It's always very interesting to hear about your passion about this. I will start off by asking some questions from my cheat sheet, and I will go back to what you released this morning and you briefly touched in this presentation. You are investigating the possibility of taking Episealer for the for big toe in the US. I was wondering if you can just give us some background and explain what triggered this, how the competition looks like, and how it affects your cash runway.
Yep. So I'll start with the last question. The total budget for this up to filing and up to launch is about 3 million Swedish kronor. So that does not affect our budget in any material way. Then what triggered this, I will actually admit that this was on the drawing table in Episurf long before I joined, so 6-7 years ago. It was stopped out of various reasons at that point in time, but some meetings with the industry late 2020 really triggered our interest in this market again. And there was one product that was launched in the market with big excitement that actually failed. So we figured that there really is a problem to solve here. And we've been thinking about this, and over last Christmas we thought about it a lot, and then we came back in January and said let's take a deep, serious look at this. So ultimately the market needs a good implant. I mentioned that there are many implants in this market available, but we don't see that there is an adequate one when you look at what patients and surgeons need. So we feel after this review that we have something to bring to the table, and now we're doing that.
And the sort of dynamic in this market, is it the typical orthopedic giants that have a large chunk also for this indication, or does it differ?
The ankle market is much more fragmented. The extremity segment, simply put, smaller joints, is probably the fastest growing segment within the orthopedic industry, and it's also highly fragmented with several smaller players. And the bigger players tend to be in the sort of spine market with the big products and knee replacement products, and the big knee replacements for knee osteoarthritis and so on. So this segment much more fragmented is the comment.
And following Episealer, it becomes quite clear that you are adding clinical evidence all the time almost. How important is it to back up the implant with clinical evidence in order to successfully commercialize Episealer?
Yeah, so we don't have a choice, because going into a bigger customer group than the sort of first innovator group requires, from a formal perspective point of view, data, because then you're suddenly in discussions with hospital boards about approvals, reimbursement agencies, and so on. And take something like this to a bigger market requires data. So that's one thing. And then we've also learned that when you look at the early innovators and early majority and going on, what works with the early innovators, many companies fail because they think that will work with a bigger group, and it's not that easy always. So for us, the data is the key to be able to access a much bigger group of surgeons, and that is what we are here to do now in the next years.
It's quite clear that you have your eyes set for the US market, and you might actually have 2 implants already on the market before you come in with the PMA filing. I was just wondering if you can share how the recruitment is going for that trial.
Yes, so I will actually give you I'm happy that you asked that question, because I'll probably give you a better answer today than what I've been doing before. So during COVID, it was essentially a stop, and it's difficult to say how much depended on tough criteria, how much was due to COVID, and so on and so on. So we have the 2 first patients that have been operated on, but there has been several hundreds of screens, and we have had many screen failures. So there's been activity with the sites. We have the sites, and if you look at all those screen failures, they come down to the majority of them to 11 reasons. And we have now changed the protocol with the FDA. We have that approved. We've said that before. And out of those 11, 8 of those are fixed in the new protocol. Then you have some related to safety and things that can't be changed, but the majority has been addressed now. And in addition, we have hired someone, so we have a powerful person on the ground to work with the sites to really drive this more actively. So I think we've been doing everything. So I think we are in a very good position post-COVID with the new FDA protocol, someone in place to drive it forward. So it has been, it's been very bad during COVID, of course, but now we're in a totally different position.
And a couple of weeks ago, Biomentus acquired CardioHeal, which is a competitor to you. And I was just wondering if you can share some insights you have regarding that acquisition and what it means for the market as a whole. Yeah. So I can't say too much about that particular acquisition, but if there is a product within the small implant field launched in the market before us, it's not necessarily bad, because some of the competition for our Episealer technology comes from people sitting home, not being treated, waiting for a knee replacement for 10 or 15 or 20 years. So if there is an opportunity for these patients to actually be treated, that drives attention to the small implant market, and it gives surgeons and patients a knowledge about the fact that these can be treated. Then we will always try to have the best product and win an argument there. And I would also like to say that this market is big enough for several players. But for us, it's important to really have a superb product. And if someone helps us drive that market knowledge about the segment, that's
not necessarily a bad thing.
Just a final question until we have to wrap this up. You are you have significant holdings in Episurf. Where do you believe Episurf could be in the next 3 to 5 years?
So now, I think we'll be a much bigger company than today, of course. It's about driving revenues in the countries where we can drive revenue, continue to generate clinical evidence where we are set out to do that. And key target, of course, if we can deliver upon the EPIC knee study in the US market, then this becomes extremely exciting, I would think. So from a shareholder perspective, if I can speak from that perspective, I think this should be a fun stock to own. A lot of things will happen, and I will be on board for the ride. And also from a CEO perspective, we have an extensive strategy now, as you saw on the summary slide. And I believe we are in a good position to execute on all of those activities, and that will also mean that we become a much bigger and hopefully very successful company.
Thank you, Pål, for the presentation and the Q&A session.
Thank you.